1 minute ago, the monarchy's calm mask cracked because Charles didn't hint at change. He confirmed it. In a statement that sounded emotional on the surface but calculated underneath, he officially elevated Edward and Sophie's titles, turning a long whispered what-if into a royal fact. But the real shock isn't the elevation, it's the timing. Why now? And who inside the palace just lost power in the blink of an eye? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Because listen closely to how this was delivered, not as a casual update, not as a routine adjustment, but as something weighted, carefully worded, emotionally framed, and launched with the kind of precision that usually signals a palace trying to control the story before the story controls them. Charles didn't simply announce a change. He wrapped it in tenderness, in duty, in gratitude, yet every sentence felt like it had been passed through invisible hands first, refined into something that could comfort the public while warning the insiders. That's the first contradiction. The palace called it recognition, but the atmosphere around it feels like rebalancing, the kind that happens when someone's influence has started to wobble, when the old order no longer holds steady, and when loyalty becomes a currency more valuable than bloodline prestige. Edward and Sophie in that moment were not presented as merely elevated, they were positioned. The steady pair, the safe hands, the reliable faces that can stand in the gap when the institution needs a shield. And that framing matters, because it silently casts a shadow on everyone who isn't being described that way. Above scandal sounds like praise, but in palace language it's also comparison and unspoken contrast that lands like a private accusation in public clothing. Suddenly, a title isn't just a title, it becomes a message to the entire family. Stability is being rewarded, unpredictability is being managed, and the center of gravity is shifting right in front of us. That's why the reaction inside the royal orbit feels too polished, too prearranged, almost rehearsed. The smiles look measured, the supportive words arrive instantly. The unity appears as if it was scheduled, and nothing in this world moves that smoothly unless someone feared what might happen if it didn't. You can almost sense it, the quiet panic behind the calm. Because promotions like this don't only lift people up, they rearrange the map. They change who gets access, who gets invited, who gets consulted, who gets trusted when the doors close. And when that map changes overnight, someone always discovers they've been pushed further from the center without being officially pushed at all. And then the darkest question starts to burn through the palace's carefully staged warmth. Was Charles acting from pride or from urgency? If this was truly just a heartfelt tribute, why does it feel like a protective wall being built in real time? Why does it sound like a king securing his strongest pieces before the next move hits the board? Because if everyone was truly on the same page, there wouldn't be this strange, controlled silence trailing behind the announcement. There wouldn't be the sense that one person, somewhere, didn't see this coming until it was already irreversible. And just as the public celebrates the feel-good moment, the palace corridors start humming with a darker truth. Because the elevation wasn't born from joy, it was born from pressure. Royal announcements don't happen randomly. They happen when the palace can no longer control what's about to leak. And today wasn't a celebration, it was a preemptive strike. Because behind Charles' emotional tone sits a timeline nobody outside the institution was meant to notice. A deadline, a brewing scandal, a risk of humiliation. The question isn't why Edward and Sophie were elevated, it's what Charles was trying to outrun. The first clue was the palace calendar itself, how it suddenly seemed to make room, as if the institution had been holding its breath and finally decided to exhale in public before someone else did it for them. That kind of cleared space isn't courtesy, it's urgency. It's the unmistakable signature of a machine that has detected danger and is moving pieces before the impact lands. And watch the language that followed: strength, stability, service, continuity. Those are comforting words to the public, But inside royal walls, they're also the words you repeat when unity is cracking. When the inner circle is tense, when advisors are patching invisible fractures with phrases that sound gentle but carry steel underneath. Because while the cameras heard a tender tone, staff heard something else entirely. The distant rumble of a looming exposure that could stain more than one reputation. The whispers didn't feel like gossip. They felt like warnings, murmurs in corridors, clipped sentences, sudden pauses when certain names entered a room. Something was approaching that could embarrass the senior inner circle, and the palace didn't want to be caught reacting. It wanted to be seen leading. That's why Edward and Sophie's trust score suddenly mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. They weren't elevated purely as family members, they were elevated as assets, clean, consistent, dependable. The kind of figures you place in front of the crowd when the people behind them are bracing for a storm. And Charles, this is where it gets intimate, didn't sound triumphant. He sounded like someone swallowing years of resistance, like a man making peace with a decision he once fought because he feared what it implied. His emotion didn't read like joyful pride. It read like relief with a bruise beneath it. Relief that a solution had finally been chosen, and bruised resignation that it had to be chosen at all. That's what makes this moment feel less like an honor and more like a surrender to necessity, because if this were simply about rewarding loyalty, it wouldn't carry this undertone of now or never. Then comes the part the palace won't confirm, but everyone inside can feel. A private meeting allegedly happened before the announcement, and the guest list was selective, key players excluded. The kind of exclusion that doesn't happen by accident, it happens when information is dangerous, when a room becomes a vault, and when a decision must be made without interference. And once you accept that, the rumor that followed suddenly doesn't sound outrageous, it sounds plausible in the cold logic of royal survival. Someone, somewhere, threatened to go public if the balance didn't change, not with a tantrum, not with theatrics, but with the kind of quiet leverage that forces even a king to move. So now the emotional news takes on a sharper edge. Because the elevation isn't just a gift, it's a signal flare. It tells the institution who is trusted. It tells the public who to rally behind. And it tells the restless voices inside the palace that the king has chosen his shield. But that choice also creates a new fear, because if Edward and Sophie are being positioned this urgently, it suggests the palace doesn't believe the next chapter will be calm. It believes it will be contested. But to understand why Edward and Sophie suddenly became the monarchy's new pillar, you have to look at what the palace has been quietly losing: control, loyalty, and the public's patience. Overnight, Edward and Sophie weren't just reliable. They were repackaged as the monarchy's emotional anchor, two figures the public can applaud without debate. But that kind of sudden spotlight is never free. When the palace elevates someone, it's not only rewarding them, it's using them. And the more the palace praised Edward and Sophie as the steady couple, the louder one unspoken message became: someone else has become too risky to defend. Because here's what the palace won't say out loud: every royal elevation automatically creates a royal casualty. Even if no one is demoted on paper, someone is demoted in reality, access reduced, influence diluted, relevance shrinking in real time. And when Edward and Sophie rose, the ripple didn't stop at etiquette. It hit reputations, budgets, invitations, and the invisible ladder that decides who matters. Someone heard Charles's announcement and realized, with a cold, sinking certainty, I've just been replaced. The palace leaned hard on two words: service and discretion, with a suspicious intensity that didn't feel like praise so much as strategy. Their reputations were suddenly everywhere, used like a cleansing cloth over the monarchy's bruises, a reminder to the public that there are still safe hands inside a family, so often defined by tension. The audience was nudged to see Edward and Sophie as the antidote to drama, the calm solution to chaos. Yet behind closed doors, that calm came with a price. The elevation didn't simply lift them up, it widened their exposure. More duties, more scrutiny, More moments where a single misstep could be weaponized. Edward's role shifted from supportive figure to central stabilizer and internal power swing, so quiet it almost looked polite. Until you realized what it actually meant, the palace was moving its most trusted pieces closer to the king for a reason, and Sophie, her rise, was the kind that doesn't make noise until it's already changed the room. Influence doesn't always shout. Sometimes it moves through access, schedules, presence. The simple fact of being the person who is allowed close when others are kept at arm's length. That's why the resentment began to simmer in places the public would never see, because loyalty was now being rewarded publicly, and for certain figures inside the royal orbit, that reward felt like an accusation. A senior presence someone used to quiet dominance was rumoured to be furious at losing soft power to Sophie's rising status. Not because of a title alone, but because of what titles unlock. Who gets heard first? Who gets trusted? Who gets chosen when the crown needs a face that won't crumble? Then the alignments started shifting like sand. Aides quietly repositioned. Conversations shortened when certain people approached. Invitations became political weapons who appears with whom became the real headline, and every absence looked intentional. And as the palace pushed supportive stories about Edward and Sophie classic damage control choreography, the cracks underneath the choreography only widened. Because leaks don't happen in healthy families. They happen when someone wants to punish, to warn, to claim territory before it's taken from them. The most chilling reaction wasn't anger. It was silence, one family member saying nothing at all. Letting the quiet speak for them. Letting the absence of support feel like a message delivered without words. And once you realize Edward and Sophie are being positioned as the monarchy's safest face, the next question becomes terrifying: safe from what? And from whom? Because the most unsettling part isn't that the palace elevated them. It's that the move doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like a shield being raised, like a defensive maneuver against a storm already inside the palace walls. Palace insiders whisper about something far more dangerous than gossip. A private report that crossed Charles's desk and changed the conversation overnight. Not a tabloid rumor, a formal briefing. The kind that makes advisors stop smiling. The kind that forces a king to choose between pride and survival. And if that report is real, then Edward and Sophie's elevation wasn't the story. It was the response. Because the monarchy didn't announce stability, it begged for it. And when an institution as old as this begins to beg, you know the ground beneath it has already started to crack quietly, invisibly, but with enough force to terrify everyone who depends on the illusion that the crown is unshakable. The whispers say the assessment was blunt, almost cruel in its honesty, a warning of a looming credibility fracture if decisive changes weren't made, a diagnosis that didn't just measure popularity, but predicted fallout. Advisors, suddenly stripped of their polished smiles, allegedly pushed one message to the top trusted figures: must front key duties immediately. Not next month, not after the next ceremony, but now. Because somewhere inside that sealed envelope was a vulnerability the palace couldn't afford to debate in daylight. Financial optics that could ignite public anger. A reputational risk that could swallow years of carefully maintained myth. Or worse, internal betrayal, the kind that doesn't scream but leaks, drop by drop, until the entire structure smells like rot. And in that context, Charles's emotional tone stops sounding sentimental and starts sounding necessary. Not victory. Survival. Not celebration. Containment. That's why Edward and Sophie, suddenly, look less like recipients of honor and more like the cleanest solution with the least backlash. The pair the public can accept without suspicion. The faces that can be placed at the front of the institution while the real firefighting happens behind closed doors. But that solution comes with a cost. Because in royal life, titles aren't just honor, they're access. Access to schedules, influence, the invisible machinery that decides what gets amplified and what gets buried. Their elevation doesn't simply raise status, it expands reach. And once you understand that, you begin to see the promotion as a quiet transfer of power disguised as duty. With elevation comes proximity, more direct contact with Charles and the core advisors who shape the monarchy's next moves. And Sophie, in particular, becomes something more than admired. She becomes trusted in the way that truly matters. Socially, strategically, privately, she becomes a quiet gatekeeper, the person who can enter rooms others are kept outside of, the one whose presence signals permission. Edward, too, is repositioned not as a supportive spare, but as a stabilizer tasked with supervising areas that may once have belonged to other hands. The result is a new triangle of influence around the king, subtle but unmistakable, reshaping who gets heard, who gets briefed, who gets protected. And then comes the rumor that makes this feel less like a family moment and more like a contract, that a senior advisor threatened resignation if Charles delayed. Not a tantrum, a warning. A line drawn, a pressure point exposed. Because if a king must be pushed into action, it means the threat is bigger than pride. It means someone, somewhere, believes time has run out, and if the report truly named names, if one name in particular made Charles's blood run cold, then Edward and Sophie's elevation becomes a response to something specific, not abstract. A calculated shield raised against a precise danger. The public will see warmth, smiles, duty. But inside the palace, warmth can be a costume, and duty can be a weapon. Their new power will create new enemies, because every gatekeeper creates a locked-out crowd. And if this elevation is about control as much as recognition, then the story turns personal in the most unsettling way, because Charles didn't just elevate them, he exposed his own vulnerability. People replay Charles's confirmation and focus on the words, but the real clue is the emotion underneath them, because when a king sounds shaken, it's rarely sentimental. It's usually fear dressed as tenderness. In that moment, Charles didn't just honor Edward and Sophie, he hinted that he needed them. Needed them urgently. Needed them for something he couldn't name publicly. And that's what makes this announcement feel less like joy and more like a warning. You could hear it in the way the reassurance was layered into every phrase, as if he wasn't only speaking to the nation but to the institution itself, calming it, steadying it, pleading with it to hold. The tone didn't carry celebratory pride, it carried urgency. A tightness that suggested time had been lost, options had narrowed, and the palace had reached the stage where emotion becomes evidence. Because the rollout was too fast, too controlled, too immediate. The palace moved like it was racing a narrative, like it knew something else was about to take the oxygen first. Insiders described the king's energy as pressured, less a man basking in a heartfelt moment, and more a man bracing for consequences, delivering comfort with one hand while gripping the edge of the table with the other. And then there was Edward and Sophie, calm, composed, almost pre-prepared, the kind of steadiness that doesn't come from surprise. It comes from briefing, from knowing, from being told in private what the public would only learn in a polished statement. That contrast, the king sounding strained while they seemed already settled, only deepened the suspicion that the announcement wasn't the start of something. It was the response to something already in motion. And notice what the statement refused to do. It refused to name a reason. No direct explanation, no clear trigger, no obvious catalyst, just gratitude, duty, and carefully chosen warmth. Classic sign of hidden conflict. Because when the palace has a harmless story, it tells it plainly. When it has a dangerous story, it buries it under softness and ceremony, and hopes the crowd applauds too loudly to hear what's missing. That's why one chilling interpretation spread almost instantly among those who read between royal lines. Charles isn't celebrating. He's building a life raft inside his own family. He's placing trusted figures close because he believes the water is rising and he needs people who won't panic when the walls start sweating. And if that's true, then the palace's next move becomes inevitable. Control the optics, lock down access, and pretend unity, while the real battle intensifies behind the smiles. Because the palace wants the world to believe this is harmony. But harmony doesn't leak. Harmony doesn't produce sudden anonymous briefings and quiet snubs at private gatherings. And yet almost immediately rumors start dripping out. Who wasn't informed, who is furious, who feels betrayed, and who is now being managed. Anonymous voices begin shaping the story, and that alone proves internal factions are fighting, because people don't whisper to the press when they feel safe. They whisper when they feel threatened. One camp praises the elevation as necessary, framing it as stability. Another calls it humiliating, treating it like a public vote of no confidence in someone else's influence. Sophie's rising presence becomes a lightning rod for resentment, because gatekeepers attract enemies the moment they become essential. Edward, too, is pulled into conflicts he spent years avoiding, forced into a position where neutrality becomes impossible, because when power shifts, silence is interpreted as betrayal. Staffers sense it first, schedules change, access narrows, gatekeeping intensifies, and the palace's polite rhythm becomes sharper, harder, more guarded. Even the family's public smiles start to look different, too polished, too tense, too staged, as if everyone is performing unity while privately counting loyalties. Then a final whisper lands like a match in dry grass. This is only the first elevation, more changes are coming. And when the palace begins preparing the public for more changes, it means the real plan is bigger than Edward and Sophie, because this announcement may be the opening move in a full royal reset. But if Charles is building a life raft, the storm must already be overhead, and that leads to the most dangerous part of this saga, the confrontation this move quietly triggers. Here's the twist that makes this story feel like a thriller instead of a celebration. Edward and Sophie's elevation doesn't just change their future, it hints the monarchy is preparing for a scenario the public hasn't been told to imagine yet. A reshuffle. A containment strategy. A controlled transfer of duties that looks orderly while hiding panic underneath. Because when a king elevates the quietest couple so suddenly, it's not just to honor them, it's to brace for impact. Because this move doesn't land like a simple reward, it lands like a first domino. The kind of decision that only makes sense when you accept the palace is planning for speed, not tradition. If the monarchy believed tomorrow would look like yesterday, there would be no need to redistribute anything quickly. But this elevation carries the unmistakable scent of preparation, like the institution is quietly rehearsing a new structure before it's forced into one. Step 1. Put the most trusted faces forward. Step 2. Make sure the public gets familiar with them fast. And Step 3. Never say out loud why you're doing any of it. That's how royal strategy works when the crown wants to look calm while moving like it's under siege. Edward and Sophie are being turned into a stability brand, and the word brand matters here, because it's not about their feelings, it's about what they represent. Quiet duty. Safe headlines. No chaos attached. In an age where reputations can collapse in minutes, the palace needs buffers it can lean on during turbulence. And their rise suggests Charles anticipates more shocks, maybe not one scandal, but a chain reaction. The kind of reputational tremor that rattles the entire structure, forcing emergency substitutes into roles the public was never told would need replacing. And when you frame it that way, this elevation stops looking like a warm family gesture and starts looking like a carefully built safety net. That's where the most unsettling possibility creeps in. The palace may be building a new inner circle, and it may be doing it in a way that quietly excludes a once dominant figure, not with an announcement, not with a confrontation, but with something more ruthless: relevance being redirected, influence being rerouted, access being quietly reassigned. The crown doesn't always remove people with dramatic exits. Sometimes it removes them by simply building a new center and letting the old ones starve of attention. Edward's role in this feels especially strategic, because he isn't just being elevated as a symbol, he's being positioned as a mediator, and possibly an enforcer of new boundaries. The one who can deliver uncomfortable messages without triggering open war. The one who can say this is how it will be while still sounding like family. And Sophie's role may be even more pivotal, because her power isn't the kind that shouts. It's the kind that sits close, listens longer, remembers everything, and becomes essential without ever appearing threatening. Trust, discretion, influence, those are the real currencies here. The institution doesn't simply need a couple who looks stable. It needs people who can carry secrets, contain damage, and move through the palace like calm water while everyone else is breathing smoke. Which raises the chilling question that refuses to go away. What does the palace know is coming next, and who will be left standing when it arrives? Because if the monarchy is bracing for impact, then the impact isn't theoretical. It's scheduled, it's approaching. And Edward and Sophie's elevation may be the public-facing beginning of a private plan already in motion, one designed to keep the crown upright, even if certain relationships, reputations, or power structures crack beyond repair. The more you look at it, the less this feels like a celebration, and the more it feels like a warning written in velvet ink, meant to soothe the crowd while the palace quietly locks its doors. Because if this was only the official part of the announcement, the unofficial aftermath is where the monarchy's real secrets start spilling. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.